The breakup message I sent my ex-boyfriend was screenshotted and posted into his group chat. The screen was flooded with people dying of laughter. "She's so pathetic. Damn, bro. You're a legend." The tears I cried all night had actually become the trophy he proudly paraded in front of his friends. What I didn't know back then was that the pair of sneakers I threw away would be kept by him for 10 whole years. My name is Clara, a fat girl weighing 165 pounds. Ethan, you still remember me, right? I am one of the few stains of humiliation in your life. The first time I saw you was in a fast food joint near our school. I was struggling with whether to order anything when you suddenly appeared in front of me. You were wearing a white button-down shirt and jeans. The sunlight hit your face, revealing shallow dimples when you smiled, looking so gentle and polite. At another table, a group of guys sat laughing and joking about something I couldn't hear. My heart was beating out of my chest. I glanced at my friends nearby and figured a guy this good-looking had to be here to confess his feelings to Amber. Knowing my place, I started to leave, but you grabbed my hand. "I like you. Seriously, Ethan, do you know?" In that moment, my heart raced so fast. I turned back around, checking over and over to make sure. "You mean me?" "Ethan, your name was known by everyone at school. I had heard it a long time ago, but I was just the most ordinary out of a sea of ordinary girls." I stared blankly at that gentle smile on your face, trying to find some kind of catch. "But I'm fat." I swallowed the rest of my words, chewing them over and over in my head. "Why would you like me?" I felt like I had just won the lottery, my whole body floating on air. I kept double-checking, because someone like Ethan felt as unreal as a dream. You just kept smiling, flashing your perfectly straight, white teeth. "Because you're really cute." It was only later that I found out you were just playing a game of truth or dare with your friends. The dare was to confess to the ugliest girl in the room without laughing. And on top of that, to make her fall in love with you and confess her feelings to you first. How ridiculous is that, Ethan? The beautiful encounter and fresh start I thought I was getting were nothing more than your entertainment when you were bored. Ethan, do you know? I could only ever wear the largest clothing sizes. And just to look a little thinner, I never dared to wear any color other than black. I didn't even dare to eat anything too greasy. Back in the dorm, my roommates would always praise me to my face, saying my chubby, pale cheeks were adorable and encouraging me to eat more, only to mock me behind my back. They loved taking me out with them because the fat spilling over my waist perfectly highlighted how slim and beautiful they were. It wasn't that I didn't know, but I was a fat girl. If I had a good personality, I was at least a cute fat girl. If my personality was bad on top of that, I wouldn't even have cute going for me. I had no choice but to play the role of the goofy, carefree girl they liked me to be. I don't know if you could ever understand that kind of deep-rooted insecurity. As a fat person, the word I heard the most was cute, because aside from being cute, people couldn't find a single other word to compliment me on. But when that word came out of your mouth, it meant something entirely different. I knew there was a catch. I knew something was off. I knew the guys sitting across from us were laughing in a weird way. I knew it all. But that day, I still couldn't stop myself from blushing. I used every last ounce of reason I had to suppress my wildly beating heart, and I forced out the words. "No, I don't like you." A confession that didn't stem from actual feelings shouldn't count, right? How should I put it? In that split second, your face darkened, and Amber, who was standing nearby, looked at me in pure shock. I understood that for people like you, being rejected by a fat girl you looked down upon was incredibly humiliating. A fat girl actually having the nerve to reject the school's most popular guy. You walked over with utter certainty, never once expecting that I would say no. But I wasn't an idiot. The idea of you liking me was a complete fantasy. I guarded my heart so fiercely because I knew I didn't have the courage to make a mistake. The moment I softened and let you in, I would be the one losing everything. I knew exactly where I stood. After that, rumors started spreading around the school, saying I didn't know my place. But you, completely out of character, started being incredibly attentive to me. You began showing up at my classroom all the time, bringing me drinks every other day, specifically, the whole milk latte that I loved but always restricted myself from ordering, along with all kinds of snacks. Every time I put on a cold face and rejected you, you would just smile playfully, hand it to me anyway, and reach out to pat my head. Clara, being chubby is really cute too. Your smile always carried the gentle warmth of the sun, like a ray of light in the dead of winter, providing an unparalleled comfort. The people around us watched you with weird expressions, looking at us as if this was some twisted story of the beast and the prince. Even my roommates started making sarcastic, biting comments about me. They wondered out loud if I was making up for my looks in other ways, because why else would you even give me the time of day? Yeah, they didn't even bother keeping up appearances anymore, because to them, I was now just a manipulative, scheming fat girl. Ethan. It wasn't until years later that I realized just how sinister your intentions were. You intentionally threw me into the center of the gossip, letting all those people isolate and alienate me. You forced me into a dark vortex where I was completely helpless, and then you swooped in like an angel. You made me feel like a drowning person in the ocean, with absolutely no one to cling to but you. That way, you could become my savior, perfectly positioned to shred my dignity to pieces whenever you wanted. But the reason time commands such reverence is that a person can never see into the future. Just as I could never have known about the rotting heart hiding behind your gentle facade. I slowly fell for the way you tilted your head and smiled in the sunset, for the light spilling from your eyes when you patted my head. And I fell for how, whenever other people mocked and ridiculed me, you would step right up and stand firmly in front of me. You said, "Clara, you don't need to change a thing. Just be yourself." You told me I was imperfect, but I was adorable just the way I was. I will always remember that, Ethan. At that moment, I thought even the sun couldn't compare to you. Your words were like a warm hand that fished my sinking heart out of the water, ironed it out, and hung it up to dry. From the bottom of my heart, I felt so incredibly lucky, wondering what I had ever done to deserve meeting someone like you. Should I laugh at myself now for just being a pawn in your little play? Or should I be flattered that someone like me was worth so much of your calculated effort and twisted dedication? To make me trust you, you even went as far as delivering breakfast to my dorm building. A piping hot bagel and that whole milk latte I loved but always held myself back from buying. That autumn, just as the weather began turning cold, you wore a charcoal gray sweater. You looked so tall and handsome, your long, slender fingers catching the sunlight with an incredibly striking beauty. You waved at me. You told me, "Clara, in my heart, you are one of a kind." And I shamefully surrendered, like a frog being slowly boiled alive. I gave you every ounce of my passion while sitting comfortably in that warm water. I figured that since I wasn't pretty enough, I needed to have a more interesting soul. Since I wasn't stunning, I needed to make up for it by being exceptionally gentle. So, when I heard you say you didn't have an umbrella in the rain, and were stuck in a classroom debating whether to share one or run back in the downpour, I instantly offered to bring one to you. At that time, I was running a fever and hopped up on medication, yet I didn't hesitate for a second to grab my only umbrella and rush over to your building. On the phone, you sounded hesitant. I knew you didn't actually want me to show up, but you were always so good with words. You said, "Clara, I don't want you to keep suffering from all the gossip because of me. So let's just keep things low-key." Because of that single sentence, tears welled up in my eyes. I was so overwhelmed by your perceived kindness that my feverish, heavy body suddenly felt light as a feather. That rain lasted for a long time. I wandered back to my dorm all by myself. Ethan. I watched the pedestrians rushing by, but your smile was the only thing echoing in my head, expanding endlessly until it felt like my ultimate salvation. So, when you casually mentioned that you wanted a new pair of sneakers, I secretly scoured online shopping sites, refreshing them over and over. My finger hovered, refusing to move away from the page showing those sneakers priced at over $200. Do you know? I only got $300 a month for living expenses, and I knew my parents gave me that money so I could focus on my studies. I had no choice but to spend countless free afternoons and nights hunting for a part-time job. Ethan, the manager at that coffee shop, didn't want to hire me. He didn't care about my stellar grades. My certificates and awards meant absolutely nothing to him. He looked me up and down, then shifted his gaze to another, much prettier girl. My fat body just looked completely out of place in his cramped little store. I understood his practical concerns, and I understood running a business was hard, but I wasn't blind to the undisguised disgust in his eyes. Yet, Ethan, the moment I pictured your face, I was refilled with courage and motivation. I told myself that, even if I didn't have many people who understood me, having you was more than enough. I walked out of that coffee shop with a foolish grin on my face. I watched the sunset slowly dip behind the towering buildings in a blaze of magnificent glory, a sight that only made me feel more pathetic and utterly defeated. From behind me, I could hear the pretty girl and the manager laughing together, blending with the chatter of students getting out of school. I told myself it was just the wind blowing dust into my eyes, and that was the only reason they stung so badly. Fortunately, I eventually managed to find a job as a tutor, even though the pay was pitifully low. I saved up for 2 whole months, hoping to give you those shoes on your birthday. For that, I even bothered your roommate. I waited outside your dorm building for days just to catch him. He seemed to have just come back from playing basketball, his body covered in sweat. When he saw me, he didn't look surprised. I asked him for help figuring out what kinds of food you liked, because I wanted to cook something delicious for you. I wasn't good at much else, but cooking was the one thing I excelled at. I wanted to show you that Clara could be amazing, too. But as I was leaving that day, I noticed a fleeting flash of pity in his eyes, along with some hesitant words he held back from saying. If I had been able to see through it all, if I had only understood, maybe things would have turned out differently. But sadly, there are no ifs in life. The day that was meant to come finally arrived. Ethan, you asked me to come to your birthday party. You told me you wanted to hear me confess my feelings to you publicly at the party. You said it would be the best birthday present ever. You said, Clara, this is my only wish. Ethan, do you know? When I was a little girl, if I so much as said one extra word to the most handsome boy in class, the other kids would jeer and ruthlessly make fun of me. Because he was the best-looking kid there, and I was just a chubby little outcast. As I grew older, I had secret crushes on other guys, too. But they would open my notebooks and read my hidden feelings out loud in mocking voices, treating it all like a giant joke. Those boys held my diary high in the air, tossing it back and forth. All my delicate, innocent feelings were nothing but a punchline to them. So, do you have any idea how much courage it took for a fat girl to confess her feelings under the staring eyes of so many people? But you said you wanted it. You said you would like it, so I nodded my head. When it came to you, I just couldn't say no. I cooked all your favorite dishes and carefully packed them into a bento box. I brought the sneakers that took me 2 months of wages to buy. I stood in front of the mirror, picking through my closet over and over until I put on what I thought was my best outfit. I even learned how to do some simple makeup. I wanted to present the very best version of myself to the person I loved. But when I pushed open the door to the private room at the bar, it was packed with people, guys and girls who all looked polished and glamorous, entirely out of my league. You were sitting on a table, laughing hysterically. You were saying, why the hell would I like her? You were saying, that idiot is going to confess to me any minute now. Your laughter sounded completely different from how it usually did. I just froze in place, entirely paralyzed. I don't know how much time passed, and I don't know whether the bento box dropped from my hands first or if my tears fell first. All I know is that by the time I snapped back to reality, the food was scattered all across the floor, and my face was drenched in tears. It turns out that when a person is in true agony, their tears really do fall like a broken string of pearls. You orchestrated everything for so long, all just for this exact moment to ridicule me, to mock me, and to crush my dignity into the dirt. Your friends were staring at me like I was something filthy, pathetic. Yes, I heard it. They called me pathetic. A pathetic, fat pig. They were holding up screenshots of the messages I stayed up late sending you, reading them out loud to me paragraph by paragraph. I can't remember who picked up the dropped bento box for me. I think it might have been that roommate of yours who had helped me before. But I didn't even have the time to thank him. I sprinted out of that room as fast as I could. It was so strange. Normally, pushing myself to run even half a mile would leave me gasping for air and feeling half dead. But that day, I ran endlessly without feeling tired at all. I didn't stop until I reached a small alley just outside the campus, where I finally gasped wildly for air, feeling like I was just coming back to life. Where should I even begin? Should I talk about the moon in the sky, or the bustling streets? I had never cried so many tears in my entire life. Everything I trusted, everything I longed for, and everything I cherished turned out to be nothing but a massive joke. Ethan, Clara was incredibly stupid. So stupid that she actually believed you liked her. She truly believed you when you said she was one of a kind. She treated those words like absolute treasure, tossing and turning in her bed at night, unable to sleep because she was so blissfully grateful to finally be cherished by someone. So stupid that she took every single word you said to heart, trying her absolute hardest to fulfill every demand you made. So stupid that she foolishly gave you every drop of her passion, burning herself alive like a moth drawn to a flame. So stupid that she willingly jumped headfirst into your trap, all just to satisfy your pathetic vanity. But she never complained. She tried her very best to be the jolly fat girl everyone expected her to be, just to provide joy for others. She understood that everyone liked shiny things. Everyone naturally gravitated toward beautiful things. Even her own parents preferred her pretty younger sister. So, when no one loved her, she didn't blame anyone. She guarded her heart relentlessly, terrified that her secret crushes would disgust people, terrified that her overflowing affection would become a burden to someone else. She really was such a kind-hearted, chubby girl. But why, Ethan? Why did you have to be so cruel? Why did you have to push someone who was already suffering down into an even deeper abyss? I don't know who it was, but someone gently draped a jacket over my head, sparing me the sheer humiliation of being seen by others. Maybe it was because his jacket carried a scent that made me feel safe, or maybe it was just because I had far too much built up inside my heart to say. My throat was incredibly hoarse. I wanted to speak. I wanted someone to hear me. Do you have to be beautiful to be loved? Is it not okay to be unpretty? Do fat people not have any dignity? Do I deserve to be trampled on? Is being fat my original sin? Giving everyone a free pass to bully and mock me? I don't remember how long I talked. It went on for so long that I thought the person next to me was gone. So long that I thought I was the only person left in the whole world. It wasn't until I finally went quiet that I heard a voice beside me. He said, "Clara, keep running forward." He said, "The world behind you is too filthy. Keep running forward, and the whole world will make way for you." From that day on, I learned that the boy's name was Jacob. He was your roommate. And he was a far, far better person than you could ever be. He was the one you badmouthed to me the most. You called him a rebellious bad boy whose arrogant attitude attracted girls. But in my eyes, he was so much more noble than you. I started running and working out. I ate diet meals. Sometimes, I would run into Jacob jogging on the track with his earphones in. He would nod at me and occasionally toss me a bottle of water on his way past. Once in a while, I would see you too. You would be parading around campus with your arm around a new girlfriend, but I just didn't care anymore. Every time I saw you, I felt a growing sense of indifference. Even the revenge I had fantasized about started feeling utterly pointless to me. Ethan. By the summer of the following year, my weight had dropped to a little over 100 pounds. I put on a little camisole and a pair of jeans, and I did my makeup beautifully. Looking at myself in the mirror, I finally felt completely at peace. But what I absolutely never expected was for you to seek me out. Outside the classroom on a rainy day, you stood out in the downpour holding an umbrella, dressed entirely in black. The crowd around us suddenly buzzed with excitement, everyone guessing who you were waiting to pick up. My heart no longer skipped a beat for you. I stood in the furthest corner, my mind occupied with that day's math problems and what I was going to eat for lunch. Out of nowhere, you walked right up to me. You still had those same smiling eyes, but now they were filled with sheer exhaustion. You said, "Clara, I need to talk to you." You said, "Let's start over." A million different scenarios flashed through my mind. I could agree, string you along, and then ruthlessly dump you. Or I could mock you right there in front of everyone and humiliate you. But surprisingly, my heart was as calm as a placid lake. You were just an insignificant stranger to me now. Ethan, Clara has always been Clara. The biggest difference between you and me isn't our looks. It's the fact that I have a bottom line of what I will and will not do. That is the fundamental difference between us. So, I just looked up at the sky, and I said, "Excuse me. Ethan, I excuse myself from you. And I excuse myself from that pathetic, battered, and bruised Clara of the past." In that very moment, I took back what I had briefly lost to you, the ability to love. I reaffirmed to myself that there is nothing wrong with love. I had simply loved the wrong person. I just thought back to that same path, and how that girl had stumbled along it for so long with a high fever. We were never walking the same road to begin with, and you were completely unworthy of my genuine heart. Ethan Mercer, my time has passed, and I am not waiting for you anymore.
His candy, Jacob's perspective. The first time Jacob saw Clara wasn't actually in college, but during the summer after his high school graduation. At that time, to escape his family, he had been riding his motorcycle with his helmet on, the engine roaring down the suburban roads. His mind was entirely consumed by the image of his mother kissing another man before walking away. He didn't know how long he had been riding, but he eventually collapsed from sheer exhaustion, lying flat on the sweltering summer asphalt. The night was heavy and dark. Suddenly, raindrops began pressing down from the sky. Without any warning, the rustling rain pelted against his body, surrounded by an absolute, suffocating darkness. It felt as if he had finally found a valid excuse to cry, the rain washing away the distinction between the water and his own tears. The teenage boy's choked sobs echoed intermittently. Just as he closed his eyes, the rain beating against his head suddenly felt much lighter. He slowly opened his eyes and looked through his helmet visor. Bathed in the warm glow of a street lamp was a small red umbrella, and the owner of that umbrella had an incredibly gentle pair of eyes. The first thing Jacob always looked at was a person's eyes. He despised the deceptive nature of physical appearances and was instead obsessed with discovering what lay behind the gaze. He didn't know why the girl was holding the umbrella over him, and he didn't care either. She'd probably just leave in a minute. A brief wave of irritation washed over him. But to his complete surprise, the girl didn't leave. Instead, she crouched down right next to him and carefully pressed a piece of candy into the palm of his hand. Her hand was warm, and her voice was impossibly soft. He could hear her voice clearly. "Don't cry. Here, have a piece of candy," she said. "If you keep a piece of candy in your mouth when you cry, it won't taste so bitter anymore." Afterwards, the girl left the umbrella with him and walked off alone into the pitch-black night. He watched her retreating figure, feeling an inexplicable warmth spread across his chest. The candy in his palm was practically melting from the heat of his grasp. How long had it been since he had cried? And how long had it been since someone had offered him a piece of candy to comfort him when he did? His parents always maintained a facade of perfect decency, but in reality, they had gone their separate ways a long time ago. His mother, an incredibly famous dancer, brimming with talent and striking beauty, seemed to be someone his father could never truly please. That beautiful woman never seemed to care about either of them. When he was little, he wanted to win her affection, so he fought to be number one in absolutely everything. He would bring those shiny awards and place them right in front of her. But she seemed completely blind to the eager, hopeful look in the little boy's eyes. She would just casually grab a piece of candy from the table to dismiss him, and eventually even the candy stopped coming. She offered nothing more than a distant smile, or a simple, detached nod. He had always assumed his mother just had a cold personality. He never realized that the beautiful woman was actually capable of flashing radiant smiles at someone else, or that she would betray her own family for another man, abandoning her husband and son to walk away without a single glance backward. So, while all the other guys his age were busy going on dates and kissing pretty girls, Jacob was loud, fierce, and wildly rebellious. Yet, he had learned far too early how to shoulder everything entirely on his own. He possessed a nature that made people want to tame him, while keeping them at an absolute arm's length. He seemed to fit right in with that crowd of wealthy, privileged trust fund kids, but at the same time, he always hovered just outside their circle, untethered and brimming with a raw, youthful edge. It was exactly like how Ethan effortlessly commanded any room he walked into as the golden boy, but the second he met Jacob's cold, detached gaze, he faltered and showed fear. It wasn't just because their fathers were constantly comparing the two of them. It was mostly because Ethan felt as though everything hiding deep inside his own heart was completely laid bare under Jacob's perpetually indifferent stare. The next time Jacob saw Clara, she was waiting for him right outside his dorm building. Under the scorching sun, the girl braved the oppressive heat just to catch him. Her cheeks flushed a deep red. In that split second, a rare surge of nervousness washed over the usually apathetic boy. Jacob didn't even know whether he was terrified or hopeful that she had recognized him, that perhaps the clumsy girl had managed to recognize his eyes through the narrow slit of his motorcycle helmet. Those eyes that belonged entirely to him. The eyes that could see right through everything, straight into a person's soul. But, of course, she hadn't. The person she asked about was Ethan. The girl eagerly fired off question after question, asking him what kind of gifts Ethan liked, what kind of food he preferred. Maybe it was because the weather was too hot, or maybe the stagnant wind was making him feel suffocated. But a prick of impatience flared up inside Jacob's chest. He really didn't like the way she looked so flustered and starry-eyed. He didn't like her looking starry-eyed for someone else. It was a dark, murky emotion, so faint he could barely even register it. There were a few moments when he genuinely wanted to interrupt her relentless chatter and demand to know if she had forgotten what she had done for him back then. But seeing how genuinely happy she looked, his heart abruptly softened. He figured he would just help her out as a way to repay her kindness. And so, the boy who absolutely despised meddling in other people's business secretly started gathering information about all of Ethan's preferences for her. He was also the one who taste-tested her very first disastrous attempt at making a bento box. It was incredibly bitter, way too salty, and genuinely awful. His immediate reflex was to spit it out. But under the glow of the sunset, the girl stared at him with a face full of pure hope. Behind her was the comforting aura of a normal life, the breeze carrying the warm, savory scent of home-cooked food. Like he was possessed, he swallowed it down. This was something he had never once possessed, yet had wished for countless times. It was exactly like when he was younger, hopelessly wishing he could eat a meal cooked by his own mother. Back then, he would listen to his classmates complain about how terrible their mother's cooking was. His hand would freeze mid-motion as he drank his bottled water. The young boy would stare out the window at the blue sky, silently thinking to himself, "If only my mom could make a meal for me, how wonderful that would be." Clara would probably never realize just how much deep-rooted agony was hidden inside a completely casual sentence from him. He finished the entire plate of stir-fried vegetables. Then, sounding entirely nonchalant but carrying a faint trace of tension, he said, "This food, let's just pretend you made it for me." Clara, who was washing dishes and humming a light-hearted tune, turned around with a bright smile and simply said okay. Standing behind her, Jacob's lips twitched upward into a faint smile. His almost imperceptible grin was like a feather brushing lightly against the sunset, a secret he kept entirely to himself. Naturally, he had also heard all the vicious rumors spreading about Clara and Ethan. The teenager was dominating the basketball court when he heard a guy from the opposing team snickering about her. He kept calling her a fat pig, laughing about how she had absolutely no self-awareness. Before the guy could spit out anything more disgusting, a basketball smashed violently into the side of his head. He looked up and saw Jacob standing on the court, dressed entirely in black, flashing a cynical, arrogant smirk. His eyes were filled with nothing but casual contempt. And the worst part was, Jacob had every right to look down on everyone. The wild wind messed up the hair on his forehead. With his naturally striking looks, his imposing presence felt even more reckless and unbridled. Jacob himself couldn't figure out why he was helping her. Maybe it was for that single piece of candy. Maybe it was for that plate of food. Or maybe it was simply because she was Clara. Foolish yet impossibly sincere. Clara, who loved with such reckless, solitary courage. But the little idiot just had to go and fall for someone like Ethan. How long could he realistically keep covering for her? It wasn't that he hadn't warned Ethan, but he had absolutely no standing to defend her. To Clara, he was nothing more than an insignificant acquaintance. He originally had zero intention of going to that birthday party. But somehow, as if compelled by a ghost, he ended up going anyway. He was someone who always maintained absolute composure, yet the moment he saw the utter devastation shatter across Clara's eyes, a sharp pang of actual heartache pierced his chest. It was the first time he had ever thrown a punch at someone, and he did it for that foolish, chubby girl. There was only one voice echoing in his head. This was the Clara who had seen him cry. This was the Clara who had given him candy. More than anything, this was the purest, most untainted version of love he had ever witnessed in his life. He finally found his justification to protect her. He owed her a piece of candy. Afterward, he searched through street after street, alleys and main roads, pushing through crowds of people. He finally spotted her, looking completely shattered and defeated. Honestly speaking, it wasn't a pretty sight at all. But when Jacob heard those gut-wrenching sobs, he felt a profound, visceral empathy. It dragged him right back to that night when he was alone against the crushing darkness, desperate to cry out all the suffocating grievances inside his own heart. He slowed his pace and approached her. The usually brash, arrogant teenager frantically and carefully dug through every pocket he had. But he couldn't find a single piece of candy. She was the one who said that if you ate candy, it wouldn't taste bitter anymore. In that split second, he deeply resented himself. He gently draped his jacket over her head, shielding her from the humiliating stares of passers-by. He heard her scratchy, hoarse voice. She asked him if someone had to be beautiful to be loved. Was it not okay to be unpretty? What she didn't know was that in that exact moment, the wild, defiant boy who feared absolutely nothing had red-rimmed eyes just for her. He wanted to tell her. The very first time he saw her on that midsummer night, he looked right past the physical flesh that the world obsesses over, flesh that will eventually rot and turn to dust, and caught a fleeting glimpse of her burning, passionate soul. A single, stunning glance at those warm, gentle eyes had etched itself right into his vision, and apparently, right into his heart. Clara, keep running forward. The whole world will make way for you. What he didn't say out loud was, the world behind you is too filthy. So let me stand here and block the filth for you. So, during the 200+ days she spent losing weight, he would always be there with his earphones in, trailing behind her, watching her run further and further ahead. He followed her in total silence, tossing her a bottle of water every now and then. All because that stubborn girl who didn't care about her own life had once pushed herself to run 2 miles in the blazing heat and passed out from heatstroke mid-run. She had no idea that the boy who hauled her heavy body onto his back, the helpful classmate who carried her all the way from the track to the campus clinic, was him. He left right before she woke up, leaving nothing but a piece of candy right in the palm of her hand, along with a sticky note encouraging her. From that day forward, he showed up at the track every single day to keep her company. He constantly wondered when she would finally turn her head and look back, to see that the world behind her wasn't just full of filth. It also held him. The world was incredibly dirty, but Jacob wasn't. By the following summer, he walked out of his father's company. He was balancing top-tier grades in school while flawlessly managing the family business. At a business dinner, his aura was more composed than ever. His facial features had deepened, making him so breathtakingly handsome that people hardly dared to look directly at him. But anyone who truly knew him could tell that, despite his calm exterior, the flush creeping up the tips of his ears completely gave him away. He had just scrolled past a photo posted on the university's public social media page. It was a picture of Ethan seeking her out earlier that afternoon. His eyes locked onto that photo, staring hard. After a long, agonizing pause, he dialed her number. He had no choice. He inwardly sneered at himself. The alcohol was far too intoxicating, leaving a sour, aching burn right inside his chest. He missed her so terribly much. He wanted so badly to kiss her. When she finally arrived, he was squatting right on the edge of the curb. The street lamps were blindingly bright, and a light, misty rain was beginning to drift down over the streets. He lifted his head and saw the girl wearing a white slip dress, holding a small red umbrella. Those eyes were brimming with laughter, swirling like a river of stars, hiding a soul that burned red-hot. The girl held the umbrella over him as she walked closer, step by step, taking in his reddened eyes. He heard her voice cut through the rain. "Don't cry. Here, I'll treat you to some candy." She opened her palm to reveal a single piece of wrapped candy, then leaned in close to his ear and added with a cunning little smirk, "Now you owe me another piece of candy." The boy's pure, Clear laughter tore through the lonely, isolated night. He had finally gotten exactly what he wished for. Dark clouds can never permanently hide the sun. Eventually, someone will look past your decaying physical shell and see your burning, passionate soul. When the morning sun rises, the young boy will ride his horse to the ends of the earth. And right now, in the prime of their youth, they were destined to live fiercely, unapologetically, and brilliantly alive.
Only Clara's piece, Ethan's perspective. On my 30th birthday, a steady, drizzling rain fell outside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched a young girl picking up paper bellflowers that had scattered all over the wet ground. She was a girl chasing after my young nephew, a girl whose looks could only generously be described as plain. It's very strange. Over the years, I rarely ever commented on a girl's appearance anymore. I instinctively weighed my words, carefully chewing on every syllable before finally letting them pass through my lips. The heavy rain battered against her body. Her eyes were rimmed red, but her gaze was filled with absolute, fiery devotion. She looked up and met my gaze. In that exact moment, the overflowing love still lingering in her eyes, that distinct color of solitary, reckless courage, was like a violent splash of crimson that rendered me completely speechless for a long time. I hadn't seen a look like that in years. It looked exactly like someone else. Someone I very rarely allowed myself to think about. Clara, you will never know that this was the first time in 10 entire years I let myself chew over your name in my head. It happened on the most painfully ordinary afternoon. A standard sonata played softly in my ears, and the air smelled heavily of damp rain. Downstairs, the house was packed and loud, filled with people who had come to celebrate my birthday. Yet, as I stood at the absolute pinnacle, finally holding the wealth and status I had obsessed over, surrounded by absolute masters of deceit, I suddenly thought of you. It's not that I haven't heard your name over the years. Through scattered fragments of conversation here and there, I managed to piece together a complete, yet entirely unfamiliar version of you. The way they described you, you had grown increasingly beautiful, vibrant, and effortlessly charming. I heard you were bold, fearless, and lived a fiercely passionate life. They were all absolutely stunned by how incredibly beautiful and breathtaking you had become. Some people even tentatively teased me, asking if I regretted dumping you back then. But it's so strange, Clara. What I recalled wasn't the glamorous, gorgeous version of you that came later. Like a sick masochist, I drowned myself entirely in the past, obsessively picturing that face of yours that wasn't exactly pretty, but just a little cute. All the words I couldn't bring myself to say when I was 20 simply rotted away right there in my chest. From the moment I could form memories, I was a master at calculating my own advantage. Scheming was as normal as breathing. From a very young age, I was rigorously groomed into a hyper-rational machine that placed its own interests above everything else. Most of the rich kids I hung out with were exactly the same. Using underhanded tactics was no different from eating or drinking to me. It was exactly like my parents, who kept up the pristine facade of a perfect marriage while secretly plotting against each other behind closed doors. To them, I was just a project, and their main concern was figuring out how to maximize my overall market value. I was basically just an empty vessel. They forged me into an exquisite, flawless shell, and then carefully poured all their expectations and calculations directly inside me. That way, I became their highly satisfactory masterpiece, a perfectly respectable showpiece they could parade around for everyone to see. Because of that, the world I saw was pitch black, and I simply accepted that blackness as the natural state of things. To people like us, love was nothing more than a prettier disguise for raw greed. It was just another weight to throw on the scale, an asset ready to be sold to the highest bidder at a moment's notice. Clara, the me back then could never have imagined that your incredibly brave, unconditionally giving love would become the single greatest anomaly in my perfectly stable life. The story started with a mind-numbingly boring game of truth or dare. When your face turned completely red and you actually rejected me, I felt a violent surge of absolute rage. I was born fiercely competitive, needing to be number one in absolutely everything. I was so desperate to be the apex predator that I would practically gamble with my life just to win a street race. So, applying everything I had been taught, I naturally assumed this was nothing but a game. Watching you struggle, watching your flushed face, watching you sink deeper and deeper into the trap step by step, it felt exactly like watching a progress bar slowly fill up. But Clara, the day I walked past that coffee shop, you were standing right in the middle of a crowd, arguing until your face was bright red with the manager. You looked so entirely out of place in this world. In that exact second, my mind suddenly flashed back to the way you had looked up at me, a mix of utter terror and sheer, overwhelming gratitude. You had said, "Ethan, thank you. Seriously, thank you." You thanked me over and over again, treating me like I was your ultimate salvation. At that moment, the sun was hitting your face, and your eyelashes fluttered so rapidly. I suddenly realized that you really weren't that ugly. Before that, I could easily, hypocritically spout lines like, "Clara, being chubby is really cute too." But right then, the words caught in my throat. I stood perfectly still, watching how completely powerless you were. The sun was setting, and you were completely deaf to the roaring noise behind you. But I saw you crying. Maybe it was right at that moment that a faint trace of unease took root in my chest. Later on, I learned that it was an emotion pulled up by the last remaining shreds of human conscience. It was called guilt. I don't know what I was thinking. I reached out to someone I knew and helped her secure a part-time job. I comforted myself with the excuse that I was only doing it so I could manipulate you more effectively later on. I completely didn't expect that after coming back drunk from a bar one night, I would suddenly spike a massive fever. Inside the dorm, my roommates were either glued to their video games or passed out asleep. The fever refused to break. In a moment of absolute delirium, I called your phone. Your completely unconditional devotion had deeply conditioned my subconscious. The second I felt truly vulnerable, my first instinct was to seek you out. Because I knew you wouldn't say no. That's right, Clara, you never rejected me. It felt like no matter what I demanded, even if the sky were literally falling down, you would just smile cheerfully and agree. When I finally woke up in the hospital, I was told you had already left. I heard that to rush over to me in the middle of the night, you sneaked out through the side door of your dorm and took a massive fall on the concrete steps. My roommates and frat brothers stood around my hospital room, aggressively mocking you. They loudly described exactly how pathetic you looked, laughing at how ridiculous your heavy limping was. My throat was so bone dry that I couldn't force a single word out. I told myself it must just be because I hadn't had any water during the long fever. As my birthday drew closer, the private room at the bar that day was packed and deafeningly loud. All of a sudden, I didn't want you to show up. I didn't want you to show up looking like a complete joke. I knew you would bring those sneakers. I knew you would arrive carrying your most genuine blessings and untempered passion. Just like that time I told you to come, even though you were clearly terrified, you nodded anyway. It was loud that day, incredibly loud. When you walked through that door, Clara, all I could think was that their voices were excruciatingly noisy. According to the plan, I was supposed to say something right then, but I couldn't form the words. I listened to the guys I called my brothers hurl the most vicious insults at you, exactly like I had originally wanted. Fat pig. Pathetic loser. And you just stood right in the center of that crowd. It wasn't the same hopeful look you always gave me. The bright, shining light in your eyes was completely gone, replaced entirely by a devastating, unfamiliar shattered look. In that split second, I didn't feel the euphoric rush I had pictured. Instead, it felt like a heavy hand was directly strangling my throat. I should have said something. But what the hell was I supposed to say? Was I supposed to stick to the script and join in on destroying you? Or was I supposed to shut them up? But what right did I have to stop them? When it came to slaughtering your dignity, they were merely accomplices. I was the mastermind. Dropping right alongside those sneakers was your absolute self-worth. Mixed with the food scattered across the dirty floor, all that remained was a total, pathetic disaster. When I heard Jacob finally step in and shut them down, honestly speaking, a sick stab of actual envy shot through me. I was jealous that he could do whatever the hell he wanted, while I was forced to face my own gutless cowardice. I couldn't bring myself to admit it out loud, Clara, but I had gone soft on you. Clara, I honestly thought that tiny flicker of guilt and weakness wouldn't stay with me for very long. Just like the pair of sneakers I dug out of the trash can right after you left. I assumed they were just trivial footnotes in my life, like a dragonfly skimming the surface of a lake, sending out a few brief ripples but leaving absolutely zero lasting marks. But I forgot one thing. When fireworks ignite across the night sky, even if it only lasts for a split second, the person who witnessed the explosion will never forget it. Just like how I had personally watched someone trust me with blinding, blazing intensity, holding out a heart full of burning love and setting herself on fire just for me without holding anything back. That little seed simply waited patiently in the soil of my memories, biding its time until it could inevitably take root and sprout. Clara, the boy, was far too arrogant and blind, his eyes completely covered by his youth. He couldn't recognize a priceless treasure when it was staring him right in the face. Over the years, it's not that I haven't met girls who made my heart race. Some wore no makeup at all, while others were as breathtakingly varied and gorgeous as fully bloomed roses. But the way they looked at me was exactly the same way they looked at an expensive designer bag displayed in a glass window, or at the endless zeros in a bank account. That kind of affection, love entirely contingent on external assets, was just as incredibly common to me as my old self had been. They desperately wanted to kiss my lips, desperately wanted to show me their most flawless angles. And yet, in the most inappropriate moments, I would inexplicably flash back to the day right before my birthday. That rainy day right at the entrance of the academic building. You were flashing that goofy smile, and I remember you had faint little dimples. You said, "Ethan, a guy as wonderful as you, just be safe always." Your tone was incredibly reverent, speaking the words so slowly, syllable by syllable. I pulled back my wandering gaze and thoroughly examined you. Your eyes were flooded with pure, untainted sincerity, exactly like a devoted believer praying inside a church. How many years had it been since I heard a sentence like that? It wasn't a wish for my career to skyrocket, and it wasn't a prayer for me to climb higher on the social ladder. It was just a desperate, genuine plea for me to be safe. For Ethan to just be safe. Humans are truly bizarre creatures. I've clearly acquired so much, yet a hollow sense of crushing regret permanently occupies my chest. Over the years, I rarely thought of you. I became exactly what my teenage self had mapped out, the absolute perfect machine, a roaring success by every possible metric of the secular world. Relying on my family's massive network and infinite resources, I operated in the business world like a shark in water, stacking up endless achievements and wealth. I am surrounded by so many people, business partners, family members, and certainly no shortage of girls harboring their own hidden agendas behind their eyes. They laugh and joke around, spouting the exact same sycophantic compliments and empty flattery every single year on my birthday, handing me the exact same uninspired gifts stamped with various luxury logos. Some of these people call me brother to my face, then secretly plot around the clock to hijack my assets behind my back. Others look at me with what seems like deep adoration, but are secretly just casting a massive net to catch as many rich targets as they can. Repeating the exact same banquets over and over, hearing the exact same empty blessings over and over. Every single person wears an immaculate mask pulled tight over their polished, glamorous faces. But I have never, ever seen anyone as fiercely genuine and painfully sincere as you. Looking me in the eye and telling me, word for word, "Ethan, just be safe always." Clara, it's just like this rain. It's been drizzling down for such a horribly long time. So long that I can already smell the damp moss creeping across my garden. So long that I've completely forgotten what sunlight even feels like. It's strange. In all your endless rambling, I never once heard you mention what you actually liked. You were always tilting your head up, always standing on your tiptoes, constantly asking what I liked. You memorized absolutely everything I loved. Yet the only thing I managed to remember about you was that your favorite backpack was covered in massive bellflower prints. So, 10 years later, seeing a ground completely littered with paper bellflowers, I couldn't stop myself from walking downstairs and holding an umbrella over that girl. I crouched down and listened to her weeping with absolute, gut-wrenching devastation. In that split second, piercing straight through a decade of time. I felt like I was staring right at the old you. The most terrifyingly profound part of human existence is that one random day, at one exact moment, you finally look back and abruptly realize just what the hell she was actually going through at the time. Clara, I had a dream that night. In the dream, we were back at that birthday party, and my roommate asked me, "Ethan, you don't actually like that fat pig, do you?" Everyone around me was laughing and jeering, waiting to hear the punchline. My throat was still blocked up, but I looked completely serious. Staring exactly the way you looked at me at the entrance of the academic building, I said it slowly, syllable by syllable, "I genuinely like Clara." As if the ending would magically change. As if I would actually get the chance to grow old and gray with you. When I woke up, my tears had completely soaked into my pillow. The wind seemed to be howling outside the window. And the guilt, the anxiety, and that tiny, terrifying flicker of actual love from my youth finally broke loose, raging through the years completely unshielded. Clara, I finally have to admit it. No matter how many years pass, I will never, ever meet anyone like you again. Someone who loved with your kind of reckless, suicidal bravery, burning so violently bright like a warrior severing her own arm. It was the end of July again. I hired people to plant an entire field of bellflowers right outside my bedroom window. A friend who had just flown back into the country came up to my mountain estate to escape the heat, and he noticed the flowers. He laughed with a baffled expression, completely joking around. Out of all our guys, you and Jacob are easily the weirdest. You don't plant roses or hydrangeas in your yards, but you both specifically insist on planting these. Hearing that old name, my heart violently constricted. My throat felt raw and tight, so I didn't say a word. I just stared out the window. Those white flowers swayed wildly in the wind and rain, stubbornly refusing to wither. After a long time, I finally muttered out loud, but only quietly enough for myself to hear. The same. How could it possibly be the same? The flowers are the same. And they were both planted for the exact same person. The only difference is that the person he loves actually loves him back. While the person I love no longer loves me at all. That casual little trap I set trapped you for 10 months, but it silently crawled and grew across 10 years, permanently trapping me for the rest of my miserable life. Just like those sneakers I was so sure I was going to throw away. Before I even realized it, I had kept them for 10 entire years. A confession and an apology that are a full decade late aren't worth a damn thing if I say them out loud now. So, I didn't utter a single syllable. After tonight, only the wind will know my secrets. Right before my grandmother passed away, she left a handwritten sticky note inside the drawer of her nightstand. There were no extra words, just a single sentence, "Be safe, always." Aside from you, that was the most painfully sincere act of kindness I had ever received in my entire life. Clara, from this point forward, my birthday wish every single year will always be exactly the same. It's the only thing, and the absolute last thing, I can ever do for you. To use the exact words she left me, and pray for you. Ethan Mercer only wishes that Clara will be safe, always. It's just that, in this lifetime, Ethan has one massive regret. And his regret is permanently tied to a chubby little girl.